I've helped a lot of people with media training, learning how to talk in sound bites, learning where to look, learning what the right messaging should be for your business or brand. All that stuff is so important. I've worked with a lot of brands. They think one thing is their messaging and I hear it and I'm like, that's not your messaging. The viewer, that's going to be right over their head. They are not going to care. And so a lot of times it's kind of also working on the positioning and messaging with brands or experts so they know how to communicate in the right way for viewers.
Hey, it's Renee. Welcome to the Into the Wild Show, the podcast for women who want to build incredible mental strength to level up their business and lifestyle. I'm Renee Warren, the founder of We Wild Women, author, speaker, award-winning entrepreneur, and your host. Together, we will make you unapologetic about shining your light, growing your business, and turning you into a wildly confident and successful leader. This is for you, the visionary, the go-getter, the entrepreneur, and for those that need a real kick in the butt to get going and to dream bigger. Each week, I bring in leading experts and entrepreneurs to help you take leaps in the right direction, because I know the best advice comes from someone who has successfully done it before. So, are you ready to level up? Welcome to Into the Wild. Hey, you wild women. My next guest is a small business PR and media strategist teaching you how to land press and partnerships with no budget, no connections, or publicists required. Nicole shares her pitch formula, the same one that landed her on Today, Extra TV, and more, and her PR roadmap, which she's developed from her 25-year career as a national magazine journalist and on-air beauty expert known as the Beauty Girl. As a media insider, Nicole provides priceless access and industry secrets so you can bypass the gatekeepers, have an advantage, and land your dream press and lucrative partnerships. As a seasoned TV host, Nicole offers media training so you can show up successfully on camera. She's written for countless magazines such as Oprah, Marie Claire, InStyle, Birdie.com, and Parents, and she regularly appears on local and national TV shows. And she served as a keynote speaker, panelist, and even host for national brands and organizations. Two of her most interesting roles include playing herself in an episode of reality TV and interviewing Busy Phillips on stage and moderating the Chicago leg of her book tour. And her most important role is being a mom to her 3 children. Nicole's mantra is, beauty shouldn't be a B, and neither should getting on TV. In this episode, Nicole and I talk all things getting on television, why this is important for entrepreneurs, and how to do it, the secret tips, and some of the insider secrets that aren't so secret, but really the mindset and why we stop ourselves from really showing up the full capacity that we can, as well as the importance of leveraging social media as your virtual digital resume to pitching yourself to be on TV. Please welcome the incredible Nicole Pearl.
Thanks for having me. I'm really excited to talk about this topic.
Me too. So I remember the first time we chatted, I think it was in February. I was like reaching out about one of your programs. And you're like, here's my cell phone, call me. And I was doing a solo retreat in the mountains of BC. And we chatted. And I was like, oh my God, I love this woman. And because just the way that you show up and you share what it's like to be in the industry and everything about it. But let us know, like, who are you and what do you do?
I will share this in a way for anyone that's listening. If you're looking to figure out how to pitch yourself, the first thing I'm going to say is that when you share who you are and what you do, it's like everything about you, but it's not about you. It's about what you listening can take away from what we do. So I'm going to quickly share who I am. I am Nicole Pearl, and I am a veteran journalist. I've been a staff magazine writer, a freelance writer for over 20 years. And I turned myself into an on-air TV beauty and lifestyle personality known as the Beauty Girl. So I pitch and book myself for TV, which is regional, national. I've done everything from the Today Show to my local morning news show. And by way of all of this insider expertise that I've built up, I'm now teaching small business founders how to do the same for themselves. So how to get featured in the media, how to get on TV, how to get those brand partnerships, without having to invest thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars in outsourcing to other people to do it for you. Because I feel like everyone deserves to get their message heard, and your circumstances or budget should not prevent you from doing that. So I'm bypassing the gatekeepers, giving you the access and all of my insider tips as someone who is in the media so you can get your name in the news.
Yeah, we definitely share those same values. I love that because, there's a time and a place for you to hire expensive agency, but it's actually not for most people. To say that most people can only get really good media coverage if they hire expensive agencies just doesn't feel right. And it isn't right because anybody can do it.
And I also think that there might be a time and place for you to outsource. But if you're going to do that, I'm all about being empowered and knowing what is the right positioning for myself, for my brand, my product. What's the best way to pitch yourself? The more knowledge you have, the more effective and successful whoever is doing it on your behalf will be, because you have to make sure that they are aligned with your mission. So there's no downside to learning this skill set.
Nope, absolutely not. So many reasons.
High five to that.
So I want to talk about TV. So there's like this whole PR world out there, which means so many different things to so many people. I believe that public relations is the mother of all marketing because it's really about building relationships. And that's what business is. Well, there's crisis PR, and then there's like podcast tours, and there's launch, and there's all these, so many things. I want to just hone in on television because it's kind of like its own complete division in terms of pitching, and it's its own nut to crack. But the first question I have for you is, why do you think most people crave wanting to be on television?
I think that TV is its own animal, and in some ways it's the hardest nut to crack. So if you actually can get on TV, it is an accomplishment and gives you this proven credibility that even going viral, let's say on social media, can't compete with. Because in order to get on TV, there's a lot more steps and a lot more people that you have to penetrate for them to say, okay, come on and use up this airtime. There's also a lot of professionalism that goes in with that. You know, your TV segments never expire. I think that there's that third-party validation that you get with TV. For me, it's definitely another level of credibility. And I think that all press is good press. But in some ways, being on social media is something everyone has access to. Being on TV, not everyone has access to that. I mean, you do if you learn how to do it, but it's just like not available to everybody immediately.
It's so true. But are people still watching TV? Like, I guess so, right?
You know, people are still watching TV and they're streaming too. But I would challenge anyone that's even listening is think about the idea of like, oh, I just saw this on TV versus how you might feel about, I don't know, seeing something that went viral on social media. I just think that you are going to leverage the press that you get from TV as a marketing vehicle, and that's never going to expire. And that's very powerful. And I think when you're thinking about the longevity of your brand, something like a viral post is in the moment and you can capture a ton of, let's say, perhaps sales in that moment. But in terms of like building that personal brand or the longevity of whatever your product is, having the TV appearance or feature is something that will never expire. It's never going to get old. You can reuse it time and time again. It's not like part of what the trends are. That is something that's evergreen for your business.
That's so true. It's like a big stamp of approval. So I'm going to kind of sidetrack here for a second because I was just thinking about how part of what I do is build up people's authority so that they become the go-to expert in their space. And that takes a long time. Yes, there's probably fast ways to get there. However, I've had clients who did become the go-to person for their like San Diego-based television, and they get called on to talk about certain subject matters, which is great. However, sometimes it doesn't do anything for their business. And so I'm wondering, from your experience, what do people get wrong if they end up going on television or become that go-to expert, but nothing happens on the other side of it?
There's an interesting mindset that you have to have when it comes to getting press in general and TV. Because going on TV, there's a chance, I've had a client, she went on TV, she booked out her salon like crazy and sold some of her new product. But then there's other times that you go on TV and it's extreme brand awareness, but there's not like an ROI in terms of sales on the other end of it. And you have to think about going on TV as building your credibility and growing your brand awareness and then leveraging that exposure or that appearance in order to build the snowball and market it to further build the momentum, if that makes sense. So I've had brands have gone on TV and they're like, well, I didn't get the sales I was expecting, but that's not what publicity is. There's a difference. One is marketing and one is publicity. And yes, they are intertwined at times, but you're not putting ad dollars into the TV segment, whereas ad dollars on Facebook ads, the whole point of that is to directly convert into a sale. Whereas building yourself as the go-to authority, the TV is an incredible step to do that. And then once you have that third-party validation, it's up to you to use that to then reach out to journalists, reach out to other producers, and you can use that as say, hey, I was featured here. And that's going to make you more marketable. That's going to make people want to work with you more because it's like, hey, I've been on the Today Show. So if you hear that I've been on the Today Show, that makes me more marketable because not everybody's done that. It's up to you, though, to learn how to leverage your publicity, essentially.
Basically, what you're saying is that you're going to use the Today Show as an example because that's kind of like the home run. Getting that segment is the ultimate stamp of approval from media that you can use and leverage to pitch other shows, other media.
Other partnerships. I mean, you can use it to monetize your business in so many ways beyond just media. So that's why I think it's so important. I mean, people will want you on their stages. Maybe it gives you a better opportunity to like land that book deal. There's so many ways that you can be creative about how you use those TV appearances to grow your brand.
And then how long would you use them for afterwards? Like 5 years, 10 years, forever?
Forever. Your press never expires. I don't care if you've been on a show 10 years ago. Obviously, the more relevant you are, the more recent your appearance is. So you can't always just kind of rely on something that happened 10 years ago. But it doesn't mean that you can't use that logo on your website. It doesn't mean that you can't say that you've been featured on. It doesn't mean that you can't talk to potential clients and say, well, I did this to book myself here. As long as you stay relevant and up to date, then it doesn't really matter.
I'm thinking, I know the listeners are probably thinking as well, is how do I know I'm ready for TV? Beyond being like, oh, I can answer a good question and I'm articulate. But in terms of what I stand for, if it's an entrepreneur talking about something, how do they know that they're ready to pitch television and be on TV?
Your credibility is everything. Credentials could be a range of things. It could be the amount of years that you've been in a field, that you've developed this expertise. It could be certifications. It could be press you've gotten that then you could use to leverage that to show your credibility to get yourself booked on a segment. But you have to know that if you're going to go on TV, you have to have some sort of service or product or value add, and you're ready for it as well. Like, for example, if you're a product-based business, and you're going to go on TV talking about a product that you have, but it hasn't gone into production yet, well, then you're a little premature. So you just have to be strategic about where you are in kind of like the lifespan of your business in terms of when you're ready to go on TV. I think sometimes people wait, they like miss the boat and almost like say that they're ready for it and it's too late, or they've missed kind of like the time frame that would have been perfect for them. But I think it's just, you would not be ready for TV if you don't have actual service tips or product to share.
Right. Most people then, at least in my community, are ready for it. And they think, oh, but I'm not as famous as, I don't know, XYZ person. I don't have that many followers on my social media account. And I haven't been on that many podcasts. So like, who am I to be the person to go on TV and pitch television? I know that's the mindset that people have. How do you get past that?
And I always say that you don't have to be somebody, in quotes, to get featured, because it's not about follower count. It's not about how many celebrities buy your product. It's just about, do you have something that's relevant and valuable to share or product to add? And I agree that a lot of people think, oh, well, she's better at this than I am. But that has nothing to do with whether or not you're ready to be on TV. One thing that I will say is that if you want to be on TV and you are not showing up on video on social media and you're not comfortable on camera, then I think you need to start practicing. I think producers want to see what you look like on video. They want to see that you're showing up in front of the camera on your social media, because the last thing they want to do is book you as a guest and then you show up and you freeze. So I do think that the practice of learning how to show up and convey your messaging in a right way is like everything, because what's the point of getting on TV and then basically missing the opportunity because your messaging isn't the right way or you don't know how to talk in sound bites. So if you're somebody that's like, okay, I show up on camera, I still get so nervous, I don't know what to do, media training is a great option for you. I've helped a lot of people with media training, learning how to talk in sound bites, learning where to look, learning what the right messaging should be for your business or brand. All that stuff is so important. I've worked with a lot of brands. They think one thing is their messaging and I hear it and I'm like, that's not your messaging. The viewer, that's going to be right over their head. They are not going to care. And so a lot of times it's kind of also working on the positioning and messaging with brands or experts so they know how to communicate in the right way for viewers.
Getting on television isn't necessarily difficult. It just requires a lot of persistence. Same goes with getting on podcasts and getting pitched and featured in the media. It's all about showing up and being persistent. So as Nicole and I talk about in this episode, there's a lot to do with social media. And I know this scares a lot of us because the biggest thing is we ask ourselves, what do I say? How do I say it? Who do I say it for? And how often should I be creating content? The reality is the best way to take advantage of creating this personal brand and your online presence is to show up as much as you can. And I'm not saying post once a month. You should be the creator. So in my household here, we teach our kids that we are creators, not consumers. Yes, they consume. Yes, they play games, but our default is to be the creator. So that is the mindset you also need to build out when it comes to preparing yourself to pitch to be on television or to be on podcasts is, as we've said in this episode, your digital presence. So your social media is your ultimate digital resume for podcast hosts, for TV producers to consider for you to be on their show. And so there's a lot of this work that we do inside our Sidelines to Headlines program, which is our retainer-based program where we help you craft your right positioning statement and the messaging, as well as your sound bites. And we create an entire content calendar for you that has a clickable content guide for every day of the month so that you know what you need to be creating in alignment with what's going on in your business. So if you're looking for help in 6 to 12 month retainer-based work to get this out there, to start pitching yourself to be on television and to get some national coverage, then check out the Sidelines to Headlines program. Go to wewildwomen.com, Sidelines to Headlines. Let's backtrack a little bit because you mentioned social media. Now, as a podcast host, for example, I get pitched a lot for people to be on my show. We're at this interesting place in the podcast where we are now not really accepting any pitches. We're going out because we have a clear list of people that we want on the show. Nicole, you're one person that I reached out myself because I want to have her on my show. But that being said, now I have to backtrack my thought. Oh, in terms of social media, part of the vetting process, there's part of this I also hate to admit, but it's just true, is that when we're looking at who we want to have on our show, we're looking at, do they have an active social media account? So active is like, I use that to vet, are they articulate? Do they show up well? Do we share similar values? Are they knowledgeable in their space? And I only know this if they're sharing their content on social. Can they show up and be interviewed? And I know this because people that just arbitrarily do lives or stories tend to be pretty good guests. But do they have a decent following? And what I mean by decent following is not 2 followers. And you can see that they're actively trying to build up an engaged audience. And so why is this? Now, you alluded to some things already, but why is that social media presence so important when it comes to pitching television?
So it's interesting because with podcasts, and I can understand how bringing on guests that do have an engaged following is such a smart strategic move, because then both of you will be able to promote the podcast episode and it is a win-win all the way around. That's great for TV too, but it's not like the ultimate factor that producers care about. They care more about the fact that you are somebody who is aligned with what they're seeing on social media is something that they're going to expect when they see you in the studio. or even if it's a virtual segment and they want to know that you're not going to freeze. I mean, I do so much live TV. If you are not prepared, if you don't know your talking points, you should never kind of memorize anything, but they also need to feel comfortable that they're having some sort of understanding or expectation of who's going to show up. And the only way they can do that pretty much is by either seeing your previous segments, sharing links to those, or them taking a quick look at your Instagram, for example. And producers are busy. They're getting pitched a ton. So if within like the first 10 seconds of them going to your Instagram, they can't see anything, it's just all static photos and you never show up, that's not going to do you any favors.
So you're really telling people to stop being so introverted and get out and start talking to the camera. The best way to get better at it is just to do it. I remember one time I told my husband, I want to get on more stages to speak. And he goes, cool. What is your plan to start doing that? It's like, I don't know. I'll just wait for them to come. He's like, no, first of all, you have to reach out. There's so much more to that. But the biggest thing he said to me was, don't say no to any speaking opportunities as they come in, especially as it's for you, it's practice, right? So you're learning how to be a better speaker. Better way to do it is just get up and do it. And I've seen this. If you followed some people, I'll use Instagram as an example, over their journey of growth, career-wise, and through their social following, is looking at their earlier content versus now. It's almost like an extension of who they are. And it's so beautiful, but they only got that way by actually doing it, by showing up and talking.
And I also think there's no downside because even if you showed up on social media and it felt really uncomfortable, and in the beginning it seems really awkward, it's still a step forward to you growing your personal brand. So ultimately, by people seeing the behind the scenes, by people seeing where your vulnerabilities are, it's only going to strengthen your brand. And you never know that perhaps one time you show up on social media and that story truly resonates, well, you might get a story or a segment idea right there from that. That could lead to a segment. I don't want you to have any missed opportunities.
That is so interesting. So another way to leverage social is that it could potentially be the thing that gets you a segment.
Totally.
So do you have any examples of friends or colleagues or even clients that this happened to?
That's a good question. Even like for myself, if I post anything on my social media that I feel like truly resonates, but this is more for editorial, but there was something that I posted on my Instagram and it got a ton of engagement. So it inspired a story idea that I might write for a magazine. We're still talking about it, but there's always that possibility.
This is not super related, but relevant in the sense that we're located in Kelowna, BC. And this past August, we had devastating wildfires that ravaged the mountains all around us. And where our house is, we got an incredible vantage point of what was happening. And over the course of the evening, we watched this fire crest the top of the mountain and come down it so fast because the winds were just crazy. And I was taking pictures and videos. You're kind of like in a trance watching this thing happening like it's a movie. And I posted some things. And because of that, so many media people reach out and be like, can we interview you? Can I get you on morning radio, on television? And quite frankly, I was just so devastated by it. It wasn't in any sort of emotional means to actually do that. But that being the example is that if you're sharing the content that the media wants right then and there, they will reach out. I wouldn't have gotten famous for being a publicist because of these fire videos that I posted. But hey, you never know. You never know. And here's why I know it could have been powerful had I said yes to this radio thing. There was like radio in Canada, CBC. I can't remember what it was. But anyways, they already had me on their radar because I had made a comment about something during the pandemic days. So like, oh, Renee Warren is already on their list and they're following me. They saw this thing and I just wasn't in the right mindset to actually talk about the fires. But now they know. And if for whatever reason, they're like in a room and there's other people like, hey, I need to talk to a certain person that talks about this. And I happen to be that person. It's so much easier for them to reach out to somebody they already know or know of than it is to go and find some random source.
That's the perfect example.
All for showing up and videotaping fires, guys. That's all you got to do. Okay, so let's get into the guts of this because I know people are like, okay, girls, how do we get on TV? So where does the process start in the actual logistics of pitching television?
I think a lot of people think it's way more intimidating or inaccessible than it truly is. It's just about learning what I call my 5 W's formula, but essentially it's understanding how to make yourself relevant, make yourself credible, and show up in a way that you're going to add value. I guess it comes down to that. It's as simple as that. And of course, in my opinion, I think the best place to start is within your community. I think locally is a great place. So I'm sure people have heard this before, but your local morning news show, great place to start. Before you pitch any show ever, make sure you watch it. Make sure you're sure that they actually have guests like you on. When you show up or when you actually do pitch, you want to make sure that you are presenting in a way that you are familiar with the show or their format or even the particular person that you're pitching.
I love that. So there's that, which I always say, like for a podcast roadshow, for example, it's the same thing as you look at your dream list, but then you look at, I hate to call them the low-hanging fruit, but there are shows that are a little bit easier to get on, probably because they're new or something, or you're like the perfect fit. The best place to start is just from those smaller shows because you want to get up and start having these conversations. I can't tell you how many times I've interviewed incredible people and we've had the most beautiful conversation, but then I press record and they all of a sudden they go cold. They're like, oh my gosh, and they're awkward. The more you do it, the better you get at it. So starting local is such a great tip. And now I'm thinking of any local television here because I got to start doing this too. Okay, so you find the outlet and you're like, who do I reach out to and what do I say?
But I do want to just make note because sometimes like, oh, local, regional, what have you. But I personally know that sometimes you will get better awareness, better results. You'll find your ideal client through local more so than you may through national. Both have their perks. Both have great benefits, but I wouldn't discount local because there's so much power in it, especially for small business founders. Okay, so next, now what, basically?
Now what do I do?
What I call it sleuthing your source. And I am a firm believer that you don't have to pay for expensive contact databases or media databases in order to kind of figure out who you're going to target, so to speak. And it's really just getting strategic with identifying which show, let's say, that you want to be on, and then go on the show's website. They might have a list of the producers. Go on the show's Instagram page. Information is out there, and it's just about you being smart about how to find it. I've gotten really good at it.
Yeah, you're expert. So people that have never even understood what a producer is. So when we're looking at who to pitch for the segment, is their title producer? Is it segment producer?
That's a really good question. Depending on the show, some of them have different titles, but typically associate producer, booking producer, sometimes they're called talent booker. It varies, but going with any of those titles usually works. Typically, the executive producer is kind of like the person on top. So they're not necessarily doing the booking. They're the people that are kind of managing the overall production. They're the ones in the control room determining what's happening with the show. So that's why you want to focus on producer, segment producer, booking producer, talent booker, those types of keywords.
So now I found this person. We'll call her Nicole. So I found Nicole and she's a booking producer. And so a silly question. Am I going to send you a fax? I remember when I first started PR, it was like right off the heels of people still sending faxes. So I'm articulating this email pitch. And I know we get stuck in the weeds of this, but this is still extremely important. So at this point now, we've built this foundation of showing up on social and talking and articulating our value. Now we have to craft years and years of experience into one little email. And what is the secret to this pitch?
A lot of people think that their why me, for example, is one thing, but it's not. And as a journalist and someone who's in the media that gets pitched all the time, if I hear another person say, well, I'm a business coach and I can grow your business, I'm like, that's awesome. There's 500 other people who are business coaches who tell me the same thing that are pitching me. So like, that's not your why you. So it's truly getting down to, if you want to call it your secret sauce or your specialty or your approach or your method, that is your why you.
So we're going back to like these reflections and really back to like positioning and messaging. I think of even publicists and PR experts is there's a lot of us and there's a lot of really great talented people. How are we different? And I'm still stuck on that too. So how do people dig deep to find that thing that makes them unique?
It's funny because I work with people like on their about story. And sometimes when it feels so obvious to the outsider, it's so hard for you to figure it out. But for example, my unique point is that I'm giving you the insider's perspective of how to pitch yourself, how to get in the media. That's kind of my unique angle. How do you find it for yourself? You want to think about also in terms of like your clients, what are some of like the burning questions that you hear over and over again? If there's certain language, or think about who is your ideal client, your dream client, let's say, trying to extract from them to help you. It's almost like reverse engineering. It's interesting. I can give you an example of someone that I've worked with who this woman is a business coach like everybody else. She's also an intuitive business coach. And her why me is going to be determined by the audience that she's pitching, because sometimes it might be more about the intuitive side of it if it's for a more spiritual type of audience that she's pitching. But if it's for like the corporate business people that she's pitching, then it's going to be more about her experience and successes like this in the companies that she's worked for that have enabled her to be this kind of like cutting edge type of business coach. That's the thing. Like within your overall story or why me, there's a lot of narratives in there, and it's figuring out which ones to pull out based on, in our situation, the TV show that you're going to be on.
Right. And every pitch, I have to highlight this and underline it, is every pitch is unique to the person you're reaching out to, because you have different angles and different stories. So like your spiritual, intuitive business coach, that pitch might be specific more for that maybe more spiritual outlet. But the people in the corporate don't, and I'm not judging, but they might not be as woo-woo. But that person, that coach can still provide that incredible value. And so you have to look at the outlet and also understand this angle might not work, or it might.
I think when people hear that, they're like, oh, this sounds like I have to do a brand new pitch every single time and it feels overwhelming. And I want to tell you that it's not the case. You don't have to start from scratch every time. You really could have the same content, but the intro is slightly tweaked. I don't want people to feel like they have to start from scratch every single time they pitch. It can't be a generic mass pitch that you send out. Like, I can smell that a mile away. I'm so not interested. But the content and tips that you have don't necessarily change. It's like, how do you spin it in the intro?
It's like word math. I describe it. I've rewritten so many pitches, and it's mostly like we create the guts of it and they're good, but you change the intro, you change a couple bullet points. I've tried 20 different variations of stuff, and I've pitched 20 different variations for clients until you find one that starts to like, oh, that works because it's so unique. It's different than all the other business coaches out there, as an example. And so this is why people turn to Nicole and I to help them craft these pitches, because it takes a kind of a different level of thinking and a different approach to how to write. So for instance, for us, it's like we only piggyback certain creative times together. So I would never record a podcast like this and then right afterwards go and start crafting pitches, because it requires a different mindset. And I urge people that aren't that creative writer, who really struggle in this area, to go out and take a sketchbook or go walk in the woods and really start thinking deep about these questions, because that's when the ideas come to you. Not when you're sitting here, oh my God, why am I good? Why me? Why am I different? It's really when you're separating yourself from those tasks. That's how we do it. That's how I've seen clients that go through my Authority Booster Intensive Day do it for themselves as well. So any tips for you on that matter?
Well, it's interesting because you brought up the writing side of it. And I've heard from people like, I'm not a good writer. Like, I don't know how to pitch. They're intimidated just by the idea of putting not pen to paper, but finger to keyboard, I guess, nowadays.
Yeah.
You don't have to be a good writer. Nobody cares if you're a good writer when you're pitching. I mean, yes, you have to know how to put a sentence together, but it's more about if you talk it out and you just get those ideas out there. That's more important. Nobody cares about anything written in this like beautiful prose. So how about this? There's no excuse to not pitch yourself because you don't think you're a good writer. I'm not going to let that one fly.
Same here. Ditto. Okay, so some really quick questions around the logistics of pitching. So you pitch, when do you follow up?
Ooh, good question. There's no like hard and fast rule, but I find that there's a bit of kind of like a flow that feels natural. And I think that I will tell you that if you wait like 10 days, you're totally out of sight, out of mind. So if you're going to pitch, I think it's almost like this little melody. I would follow up a couple of days later. I don't want people, again, to feel like, oh, I missed this, whatever, or I have to do it now. But there should be a natural flow. And think about it. If somebody sends you a text and you don't respond, it's probably because, oh my gosh, I got so many text messages. I'm so sorry, I forgot to respond to you. And then that person follows up and you're like, oh my gosh, thank you so much for following up. I totally missed this text. It's the same idea when you're pitching people. Remember, we're all human. Oh my God, there's so many times where producers have been like, thank you so much for following up. Or an editor being like, I missed the email. I put it in a folder. I totally forgot. I've got the thank you I get. Thank you for following up. If you have a good idea, they're going to be so appreciative that you actually followed up. So wait a couple of days, 48 to 72 hours, I'd say. Maybe if you're really scared, maybe a week, but I would follow up within a week.
It also depends on who you're pitching, what outlet, what form of media, why. But I will say this, that in all of the years I've been doing this, I'd say 60% of our yeses or wins came from the follow-up.
Oh,
for the same reason
hands down.
that you just said. I mean, it could even be higher. And I get some that'll follow up 2 months later. I'm so sorry. I don't know why I missed this, but absolutely yes, I want them as a guest on the show.
I will tell you that your mindset when you send your first pitch should be like, I'm so psyched right now. I just sent the email. It's not even like, oh, I hope they get it. I hope they like it. I hope they open it. No, it's like, this is a huge win. I sent the freaking email and that's it. Don't even think that they even received it or opened it, because getting a journalist or a producer to open your email, that's another thing. So it's just that you got it out.
So the other question I have is, you pitch this producer and maybe it's like a seasonal or a timely kind of angle. Can you pitch them again with a different angle?
Why not?
Right. But when? Like the next week? The next month?
I do have a follow-up formula for sure. You send out the one email and they don't respond and you email them again. You for sure should be referencing the first pitch that you sent. Maybe they never saw it. So I wouldn't just be like sending them a brand new pitch and not referencing the original. You can say, follow up, reference the original pitch. And if there's another idea or some reason that you wanted to present a second idea, that's fine. And you should. But I really also am always trying to be mindful of people who are DIYing it because I know it's effort. So I don't want you to feel like, oh my gosh, now I have to start over and write a totally new pitch. There's a way that you can do it and give them additional ideas without feeling like you have to start over and write a whole new pitch. There's a lot of shortcuts that you can do.
Totally. From the other perspective, being the producer, and I don't know if you've ever worn this hat, but you've worked closely enough with enough of them to probably get a sense. What is it that they're looking for?
You know, it's funny because when I was working with a specific producer at Extra TV, I actually asked her that question. And she was like, well, I really appreciated that you did the homework for me. So you making their job easier is going to make them really like you.
Mm-hmm. And what does that look like in terms of making their job easier?
You can send a pitch and say, I was literally just talking to my client about this. Hey, I would love to come on your show and talk about this. Okay, that's a topic. That's fine. But if you came on and said, I'd love to talk about this and here are some examples, that's doing the homework for the producer. It allows them to visualize the segment. And again, you're doing the homework for them. They don't have to send you an email being like, okay, well, what do you want to talk about? They might not have the time to do that. It seems so obvious, but so many people don't do those little things.
Yeah. Beyond TV too, I can say that for every single time you pitch is you want to take the effort off of that person's plate. And I only get pitched for podcasts and some other stuff too, which doesn't make sense to me. But to be a guest on my show, and let me tell you, even if somebody isn't a good fit, I'll reply to the person that pitched me and said, this was a really great pitch. Keep doing this. Because they took all the work off my plate. They've already studied my audience. They know what to expect in terms of, yes, I take guests, maybe an angle that would apply to what my audience needs that hasn't been spoken about. And then a couple links. It's probably to a website and a social media account. And they might give one or two topic ideas that's super relevant and super niche to what they focus on. Really, when you're writing the guts of this email, it takes a lot of effort the first time. But then after that, you create templates and you can just tweak them as you go. It's really not that difficult. But it's true. The most important thing is taking the work off of their plate. Don't make them struggle to come up with the angle. You present it to them.
I love the fact that you respond, even if it's not the right fit, because so many people, it's like the mental agony that they go through, which is why, because either the rejection or they're not knowing, and that's a real struggle. That's why the mindset part of it actually really matters, because I think sometimes it's the mindset that prevents you. whatever. We can talk more about that, but I just love that you do that to give people that peace of mind and the confidence boost that they need so they do keep going.
Yeah. And I even get that when I get like people pitch me all the time to be like, hey, I want to help you with your social media account or help you create videos to increase your followers. And I get it all the time, literally 2 or 3 a day. And I've had one guy recently, it was hilarious. He sent me a photoshopped image of my face on a $100 bill. And he had like some text below it. And he's like, hey, want to see your, whatever it was. And I replied, I go, how dare you only put me on a $100 bill? I'd rather be on $1 million bill, which probably doesn't exist. And then it was the next day, open up my inbox, he photoshopped my face on $1 million bill. And it was funny. We just did this back and forth, but we were both just loving the process. And in this moment, he took the effort to create that image, but also to understand exactly how he could help me with my videos. It wasn't just like, we can do this and this. It was like, here's a specific thing that we can do for you. So it took him an extra 10 minutes to probably watch some stuff on social, look at my website, to come up with angles in terms of the content he can help me create. And I thought that was beautiful. And I said, it's not a now thing, but definitely in the new year.
And that's how you build those relationships for sure.
Exactly. His name's Chris. I'm going to get more information. The point being is don't be a lazy pitcher. Lazy pitchers lose on every level because what we're trying to do is just help the person on the other end. Be of service to them. Be memorable. Even if it's not a good fit now, be like, hey, I remember that Nicole girl when she's following up. That was a great pitch. And she actually did her work. And so what does she have to say today? Let me open this up. Okay, we could talk about this all day long, but is there any last minute tips with regards to pitching television?
Last minute tips. Well, I would say just think about the news cycle and timing. For example, I don't know when this podcast is going to air.
Soon. It's October 11th as this happens.
Okay, let's just put it out here. It's October 11th. If you're pitching Halloween for a TV segment right now, you're a little behind the ball. They've probably already booked all of their segments for Halloween. So instead, you should be thinking about Thanksgiving, other things, November, even potentially December. That's in terms of the timeline. If you're right now in the moment being like, I'm going to get on TV before the end of the year. Well, if you're going to, then start thinking about November, December, and how you can be of service to whichever show you're pitching. So I'd give you that tip. The other thing is I do have my Get on TV guide. It's free, and that does give you 5 tips to get started. So that could also be helpful to you if you'd be interested. That you can just find on my website, NicolePearl.com, or you can DM me in Instagram at Nicole Pearl Beauty Girl. That will get you on the right foot to getting yourself on TV.
Okay, so while we're talking about timing too, just also being mindful of the horrific things that are happening in Israel right now, most people don't actually correlate pitching with these terrible events. However, there is kind of like this blanket understanding in the industry that we have to be very sensitive to these things. And bad news happens all the time. What is your take? And what are the industry standards around pitching when really bad news cycles are happening?
I love that you just asked this. Somebody else just asked me something similar. I think it's on a lot of people's minds. I feel weird even about posting on social media. Everything feels like perspective. And I'm glad that we're talking about this on this episode because what's going on is horrible. But anyway, I'm praying for everybody in Israel and all of my fellow Jewish friends and thinking about all the people. But regarding that question, for example, it's October. Let's just use Breast Cancer Awareness Month. That's also October. And if you have a foundation or if you have a business or if you are an expert or doing something that's related to breast cancer awareness, I wouldn't say to discount yourself and not pitch. It's an important mission. It's relevant. It's timely. And you should still pitch yourself and let the media determine whether or not they'll cover you, what they'll cover in the news cycle. To not pitch yourself, there's no upside to not pitching yourself. And there's nothing wrong with saying, I acknowledge what's going on in the news cycle right now. You could say, I've noticed you're primarily covering what's going on, and just be reflective and aware in when you're pitching them, and then acknowledge what's going on, let's say October for Breast Cancer Awareness Month, and how what you are doing is something that's also important that people should know about. So that's what I would say to it. I still think you should pitch.
And from a podcasting perspective too, because I've had this question asked several times, is a lot of the hosts tend to be very active on social. And you can kind of get a feel of where they are emotionally and mentally in that moment by following what they're sharing and doing on social. If it's really about the terrible news that's happening, then I would just give it a break until their old stuff starts coming back, because it always happens. But just be mindful of where these people are in their emotional state and then pitch accordingly. But yeah, I don't say stop. Like, I've had a client who is also another PR company was telling me, hey, maybe we should just put a pause on this for a second because of these things that are happening. And I said, yeah, we'll just be very diligent about how we approach this and who we're pitching. Because unfortunately, some people just don't care. And if they don't care, then pitch away. And then there's some people that are just like indifferent. It's like life goes on. And yes, this sucks, but they're not going to not do work. They're not going to not run their business because of it. But the most important thing is to be super mindful. It's not just about what's happening right now in Israel. It's just every day there's stuff. I always check people's social as much as they're online to see, are they on vacation? Did something terrible happen within their family? What's going on in their life to know that, is this going to land right? It'll get ignored, or will this be an ultimate insult to them? Because you don't want that.
I agree.
Okay, so one last question for you. When I ask you what it means to be a wild woman, what is that to you?
I think it's somebody that does not just abide by the norms, who does what she wants to do and stays true to her own voice and doesn't get sidetracked by what other people are thinking or saying.
I love it. Nicole, if people want to find you or follow you, where can they go online to find you?
My website's NicolePearl.com, and follow me on Instagram. I want to hear from you. My Instagram is at Nicole Pearl Beauty Girl.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
So there you have it. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of Into the Wild. To make this girl happy and to help reach other women who are dreaming of starting their business, please leave us a 5-star review on iTunes and everywhere you listen in. Also, if you want to find me in the wild, check me out on Instagram at Renee_Warren. That's RENEE_WARREN. And leaving you with one of my favorite tips of all time: the best advice you could ever receive is from someone who has successfully done it before you. Until next time, ladies, peace out.